take. Every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you.
Ladies and gentlemen, young and old, left and right, up and down and beyond, my name is Casey, and welcome to What Are My Kids Talking About? The podcast where we talk about dangerous internet gangs, weird Twitter communities of wannabe dictators, and how a few blogs of computer nerds end up with a cult that kills multiple people. We discuss anything and anywhere at any time, all to help you answer the all-important question, what are my kids talking about? But heaven knows I need all the help I can get. So here to help me answer it is today's guest and my dearest friend, Caleb. Caleb, how are you doing today? Are you ready to discuss some strange stuff?
I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be. I see real strange stuff on a day-to-day basis in my line of work, so it's I'd be surprised if you can surprise me, but we shall see.
Well, here's the thing, Caleb, is that you work with kids who like talk to you.
Not always.
Well, that's good to know, actually, because the topic of our show is cults. But for this first entry of the podcast, I want to start by setting up some definitions. When I'm going to use the word cult, it's a shorthand. Like, I'm not talking about, like, guys in robes, like, with knives. What I'm discussing is the concept of, like, an online cultic milieu, which is,
Sure.
yeah, it's a space where strange and often deeply incorrect ideas are tolerated and even encouraged, because, of course, they are, like the guy who made this, a guy named Campbell, came up with in the 70s, described, like, basically the aftermath of the hippie movement, or rather the stuff happening around the hippie movement, where it's like, what if aliens or drugs, you know, like stuff our audience's parents were probably doing, or maybe our audience themselves. If you're doing drugs in the 60s, comment on our Facebook page about it. I don't know. But yeah.
Don't maybe don't.
Maybe don't. Actually, don't. Yeah, that might be caught by the federal government. Actually, don't talk about that on our Facebook page. That would be a bad idea. Actually.
They're always watching.
Yeah, they're always watching. Again, cultic milieus. They're like spaces that end up similar to cults, but aren't quite. They're more like cultural waves. And online cultic milieus are essentially that, but online. And to better explain, again, just to start us off, before we get to the examples, they have the following traits. One, they don't really identify as a cult. Like, no one does. You don't even have to be a religion to be, like, in a cultic milieu. They can come from anything, an existing church, a circle of former drug addicts, a bunch of people want to, like, self-improvement themselves, anything. Even Facebook groups can be a cult. That doesn't mean every Facebook group will become a cult, but all cults come out of stuff that are essentially Facebook groups. Caleb, you've probably heard of stuff like this, right?
Yeah, it's like your friend from high school that sells all of the weird herbal supplements or magic tinctures or essential oils or whatever the flavor of the day is. They start with just the Facebook group, and then they figure out that there's this whole other ballpark of the rabbit hole that you can go down with these things, and then before long you're selling a product that you didn't know existed 2 years ago, and your whole life revolves around it.
And you might be asking, how did my sister Susan, how did her life get upended by, like, candles? Or why is my son spending so much time talking about stock marketing? Well, that's for reason number two. The idea that the members are the ones with, like, the secret or advanced knowledge. They're not being tricked. We, like, you, me, and especially you, Mildred, who, I know you're hearing this, Mildred, we are the ones that have been tricked, or are just naive. Three, and this is something I've noticed, fear of, like, a bad outcome. Like, maybe apocalypse, or, like, silent collapse if you don't do this exercise routine, or post a lot of blogs on the internet, or support this political candidate. Like, Or maybe like on a smaller scale, maybe the kids will be hurt by vaccines or robots or the Irish, right? Here's the thing I've noticed that kind of surprised me. For studies about this, these communities are not in and of themselves paranoid. That's not required to be a part of an online cult. The point is that there is some sort of risk or like something you'll miss by not getting in on this. And sometimes that's a threat, but other times it's like the absence of good stuff. Like you don't have to think the Catholics are out to get you. You just have to think that like something bad could happen around the Catholics if you don't know about the secret world of the Catholics and and buy this candle that your church is selling. I mean,
Sure, but the Catholics are trying to are out to get you. There's the whole Spanish Inquisition angle. I'm kidding, of course,
of course,
I
yeah.
sort of see what you're getting at, where just knowing about that, for example, might like if there's that kernel of truth, that's how they get you. That's the buy-in.
Right. Shared language and the sort of mixing of information, because like not only is there like an entirely new vocabulary of that 6-7 meme that your kids are talking about, but often it's mixed in with like actual information. Like they'll say, yes, the Spanish Inquisition is like what did all these horrible things to the global south, and you say, yep, that's real. And then they'll also say, and that's how the Catholic Church is sinking its hooks into the very modern day into all these communities so they can steal your children. And like, is it though? And that like sort of spirals off into like all sorts of other conspiracies. We're using Catholics as an example.
Insert enemy here, essentially. Not the important part of the story.
Yeah. You can be like really obsessed with like, say, an incoming singularity AI god, but like that could be like just regular god, and it doesn't really change much. It's really just more about creating a sense of like in-group culture through both language and fear, or even just FOMO. Like that makes members feel like they're becoming part of a fancy special community. You know, it's like a church, except instead of a church, it's something worse. And with one major difference, like, and this is the final point, there isn't a real singular leader or even official organization. That part isn't necessary. Like, that's really good study from the Global Network of Extremism. Sorry, the Global Network of Extremism and Technology. It has been a major help for this, and it's basically confirming something I've noticed. There's no singular leader. What there is like a sort of vague coalition of like thought leaders and influencers, and like the 10 tons worth of mythology, lore, and in-jokes made almost entirely through what's basically shitposting, or just posting online. Now some of these guys do make foundations and non-profits, but and like do try to give all their money to them, but that's like later down the line.
Yeah, that's just tax evasion for the love of the game.
Yeah, that's just like when you're really like, I'm going full on, I'm going whole hog. And again, this isn't like a Jim Jones or Heaven and Skate thing, these milieus. The reason I'm going over these definitions, like, they're more like a loose gang of socially isolated, vulnerable people who want a community, and that's often found online for their, like, own special interest, and it just so happens that this one community turns them and everyone else inside of it kind of bonkers. Like, we know, like,
This is, from what you're saying, this is reminding me a lot about that whole the super stonks trend on Reddit, and the everything with GameStop, or I think AMC was a part of that as well, where
right,
just all these down on their luck. With that group, it was largely male. It doesn't have to be, but all these down on their luck, isolated individuals, chronically online, if you will.
right.
You know, they all get tipped off that there's this big secret cabal, and they think it's going to be the next Big Short, and so they all go in to collectively tank it, and you have to have diamond hands to hold on to your stock.
Right.
Go to the moon, and
And
you're all
when
gonna get rich, but it's all just smoke and mirrors.
right. And here's the thing, though, that's actually our first topic, because when you hear stuff like that, like, if you hear your, like, teenage son talking about diamond hands and to the moon. Like, at a certain point, you probably just won't really know what he's talking about, and it doesn't sound like a cult. It just sounds like weird internet slang, but
Yeah, and as someone who followed that quite closely while it was going on, I suppose I didn't make the connection at the time that it was very culty. Looking back, it absolutely is, but it doesn't
right,
feel that way in the moment.
right. But it was like, and people overuse the term conspiracy theory and even misinformation a lot. Uh, so I'm going to try and avoid talking about that because they're kind of buzzwordy. Uh, Instead, I'm going to bring up the reasons why it's bad and how these things happened. So, the Superstonk guys. There's a series of subreddits online, like r/superstonks, r/WallStreetBets, who come.
WallStreetBets has a bunch of it.
Yeah, they're all on this website called Reddit, which is not itself a bad website, but rather hand-formed small communities that are very isolated.
Or large communities
Or large communities, very large.
that are equally isolated.
Yeah, and will sometimes lead to the creation of its own mythology, like what's effectively mythology. And that brings us to the concept of, or actually, that brings up the spark, which is 2021. This is within living memory, but in essence, through a series of processes that aren't really clear to me because I don't understand stocks, a bunch of Redditors decided to like inflate GameStop because a lot of these guys are gamers, and that's funny. The idea of that is funny to do, especially in 2021 where everything was going wrong. Where everything was going wrong.
Right, and if you learn again, going back to that kernel of truth, the idea that essentially they had this belief that the stockbrokers at the big tech, or not the big tech firms, but the big financial firms were artificially suppressing the value of GameStop. So they all went to buy it up to essentially force the value up. If you
Right.
create artificial scarcity, or I guess it's not artificial if everybody wants it genuinely, but
Right.
essentially that became they made scarcity out of nothing.
Yeah, and like again, the kernel of truth can sometimes evolve into just weird things to fundamentally believe. In an article in Slate by Farhad Manjoo, he brings up some of this stuff, like uh, where it's these groups of people often sort of calling themselves a bunch of different words, like apes, degenerates, and other words that we can't say on air. Um, like, they're not just trying to make money. There's like a revolutionary fervor to it, where they quote also they are where actually no to quote uh dang it, this is going to need a lot of editing. They're hoping to quote make the markets accessible and fair for everyone in the process. That's their goal. The problem is that when in March of 2023 rolls around, uh, GameStop makes like a moderate profit after losing over $300 million in 2022, and Keith Gill, an investor called otherwise known as Roaring Kitty, he has two names, posted onto the subreddit, uh, and just sort of had a weird live stream where he just sort of rambled about stuff. Like, this is just some guy's live stream and like a minor bit of profit increase. But, and again quoting that article, yet seemingly every week on r/superstonks, members clamor over one or several posts that marshal far-flung factoids to argue that a glorious day known as MOAS is around the corner. What's MOAS? An acronym for Mother of All Short Squeezes. It's the long-promised day of liberation from Wall Street bigwigs who are shorting or betting against GameStop shares. When MOAS comes, everyone invested in GameStop gets obscenely rich, and everyone betting against it is viewed to be a fraud, criminal, or plain idiot. So,
Which, of course, isn't how any of this works.
yeah, absolutely not. Like, but here's the thing: is that it's hard to tell that because just trying to understand the stock market as an adult, even as non-conspiracy theorist, or rather non-this, you're not going to know all this information. Like, there's all sorts of stuff like short squeezes and shorting that is very hard to, like, really make sense
But you
of.
can get degrees in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can get degrees,
The
which,
institution gives you degrees in that kind of stuff.
right,
Expensive degrees, degrees that pay you a lot of money to do well.
yeah. And if you see someone on, so people are instead going to go on Reddit to talk about it over and give very confident promises of liberation through their theories. Very confidently said, and often very, very long. Like, and also,
Which just dissuades people from reading it, and then they'll just upvote each other because
right,
that's fun, or it's funny, or
right,
it's, or
and
look at this person, or and then it just reinforces itself because that's how Reddit works. It shows you things that people are engaging with, that people are upvoting,
right,
and the cycle continues.
yeah,
The
and
echo chamber gets louder and louder and louder.
yeah, an important part is that a lot of these cults do talk a lot, but they don't question the main points. They just sort of it's stuff that reaffirms the core beliefs of the movement, even if they disagree with the poster, whether that be on a blog or Reddit or Facebook. That stuff gets traction. So, and often a lot of the stuff that gets traction tends to be like the nuttiest, most group affirming stuff. And again, if this is your main social group, you don't want to be a fraud, criminal, or plain idiot by going against it, do you?
Of course not.
Right.
So you just quietly upvote the weird stuff you see, go
Yeah.
about your life.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
You're losing money.
you're losing money, or at best or at worst, you're losing money for a lot of people who just come across this looking for investment advice. But their whatever AI chatbot they're using that day has decided that WallStreetBets is its source, and now
Right.
your entire portfolio is in GME, and maybe you don't have diamond hands.
Yeah. And again, it doesn't look like a super bad thing. Like, there's not even a coherent label for these guys. Like, they call themselves apes, degenerates, slurs, and like, here's the thing about these conspiracy boards. We all make fun of them, like the Charlie Day and the String conspiracy board, but it's compelling. It's a compelling story. And here's the thing, systems in social media really like compelling stories, and not just social media, because, again, quoting that article, but every time GameStop's share price has risen in 2024, the company has stepped in to issue even more shares. In other words, staving off MOAS by raking in money for itself, while keeping the stock price from surging. So, like, they're not selling a lot of video games, they're making bank off of selling its shares, as far as I can tell. So, not only is this theory wrong, it's probably impossible, and you're
I mean, in theory, they can't keep splitting the stock forever, but whether or not this fated day will come, I think that's rather far-fetched.
right. But, like, when you're surrounded by stuff like apes together strong or buy the dip, those are both words that mean anything. Investopedia has a good article on it. Those both mean things, but like it's a lot of it is just excitement and stuff, and another thing that cults do that I mentioned earlier, language.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of confusing and a lot of compelling language that can lead to people, either losing a bunch of money or, and moving on to our next topic, support an international hate movement. And which brings us to another cult, our next cult. Well, we have four cults that we're going to talk about here. This is our second one. Uh, the gender critical movement. Uh, now,
Okay, I keep hearing that brought up by people that seem to have no idea what these words mean. Could you walk me through this, especially how we're going to use the terminology in this conversation? Because I am genuinely at a loss.
Okay, well, according to the Lemke Institute, which made an short article about the rhetoric that it viewed as genocidal within this movement, which we will get to, it is, quote, focusing primarily on the imagined threat posed by transgender women, gender-critical ideologues, which is a bit of a strong word, but still, back to quoting, believe that transgender women are in fact men who are seeking to dominate cisgender women who are sense of selves. I don't need to define cisgender women. By impersonating them and therefore by getting access to women's... I'm just going to start the quote again. Quote, focusing primarily on the imagined threat posed by transgender women, but they believe that transgender women are in fact men who are seeking to dominate cisgender women by impersonating them and thereby getting access to women's bathrooms, women's locker rooms, women's sports teams, and other women's spaces. They routinely accuse transgender people of being mentally ill and believe that the parents, family members, and medical professionals who support transgender people are committing morally reprehensible acts against the transgender individuals by nurturing their illness and against society at large, by permitting dangerous people and ideas to take root. Now here's the thing. I've heard it described, end quote. I've heard it described as a far-right movement, and that's true, but not entirely true. Because...
Right, in the sense that members of the left have more recently, with the sports issue specifically,
right.
tended towards some of these positions, we'll call
Right.
them generously.
Right, and that gives it like a sort of odd... It does two things. It gives it like an odd sense of like unionism. Like, it gives a sense that like this is a unanimous thing between both left and right. Like, and here's the weirdest thing. Not just cis people are into this. One person, Debbie Hayton, a trans woman, shared photos and videos of a protester named Fern, and sort of getting in on the mockery of this person who was wearing very colorful clothes in a LGBT protest, and people were calling him a pedophile, a sexual predator, or just unsafe to be around children, as well as another tweet labeling him an adult baby with sexual paraphilia. And the context is that, no, he was just abused when he was young on what he was wearing and decided to just wear that because as an adult he can liberate himself. But none of these tweets give that context. None of these tweets give... Like, people...
Right, because a tweet is just not enough room to be contextual. A Reddit post, while technically not as limited in character count, is still the ones that are going to get seen, not meaningfully enough to give context. Nuance doesn't travel well on the internet, at least
Right.
not in my experience.
Right. And what further muddles things is that Andy No, who I mentioned earlier, he is a right-wing influencer and an obnoxious guy. He's also gay. So we have Debbie Hayden, the trans woman, and No, the gay man. It gives it sort of, especially for people who aren't gay and aren't transgender, a sort of undue authority. And
Right, it's the equivalent of, going sort of back in time to when, we had, not that we don't still have these, but like during the 1960s when you're talking about race, just having like, oh, well, I have a black friend who says that
right,
the whole segregation thing is fine, so it's all good and dandy.
right. And it doesn't even matter if that black friend is real, as long as, like, in the in-group of the gender-critical movement, it's sort of believed to be real. And it's arguably worse than gender-critical
Right.
movement, because a lot of them are women. Like the Alba Party's Women's Conference, or the Women's Human Rights Campaign are both the names of two different organizations that have also spread the untrue story of Stonewall lowering the age of consent to 10, which is just wrong. Stonewall didn't
Yeah,
do that. Like,
not only is that wrong, it's very easy to disprove with 2 seconds of Googling.
right, but it's hard to do that when you're, say, in the subreddit Over It, which is a forum set up by gender critical people, to, like, if you're just in these communities surrounded by people who look official, like one of the people spraying this was campaigning for parliament, it all looks either very community and very trustworthy or very official. Like, there are entire groups like the LGB Alliance, noticeably without the T, that spreads a lot of transphobia stuff and may, in fact, I think that might just be all they do. Like,
The whole turf thing as well.
right, that was the previous term for these. This is basically the rebranding of TERFs, which is short for trans
Well,
exclusive.
because they did,
You know,
because they realized that the whole trans exclusive radical feminist, the whole whether they realized that maybe putting if they're trying to argue against an ideology they see as radical, the putting radical in their acronym wasn't perhaps the smartest
right,
branding decision, so they're just I don't know.
and being like exclusive. Uh, Again, that's something it's not like with these new women human rights groups. Like, it's not about exclusion. It's about, say, women's human rights, or the law, or safe schools, or just having a few concerns. Yeah, it's a weird sort of
Just asking questions.
just asking questions. Again, a lot of these communities, these cultic milieu communities, not just gender critical things, it's not that information is limited, is that there's a lot of talk, a lot of information, is just all of it's garbage. Like, you ever, like,
Right, it's quality over quantity, and in
right,
an age where we're addicted to minute-long snippets and whatever buzzwords are gripping the day, it's all too easy to see a side that has a lot of arguments and say, yeah, simplicity. I
right,
get that.
yeah, and, like, when they have these kernels of truth, like, for example, in a story posted on Vice, quote, when a different demonstrator was slashed with a knife at the protest, users on Over It immediately blamed trans rights activists. And then later footage from journalist Vishal P. Singh would reveal that the stabber may have been associated with nearby Proud Boys. So, like, there was a slashing. Like, someone did bring a knife to a protest, but it's just, to again quote the article, these paraphrase the article, these incidents all had a seed of plausible or even true information at the core of their story. This makes it easy to create doubts in the minds of people who are less invested in these issues, particularly when false accounts are shared by high-status individuals and groups. Like,
Right.
it's hard.
It's if a trust it's one thing if your weird neighbor Craig is sharing these fringe theories. It's another thing if your MP is sharing it, if your local representative is sharing it, if that guy who's running for Senate is sharing it.
Right, and here's the thing about these guys is that a lot of it seems to have undue authority, and it might even convince some of y'all. The Lemke Institute brings up another thing where a group of authority had a lot of similar rhetoric. Uh, quote, uh, many, many, and I'd argue most gender criticals don't want to kill trans people, but, and this is me quoting the Lemke Institute, they do openly seek to eradicate transgender identity from the world, following a genocidal logic similar to the US, Canada, and Australian boarding schools that sought to, quote, kill the Indian and save the man, end quotes of both. And I don't think it's that extreme yet, in my personal opinion, but, like, when these guys...
Keyword yet, and I do see perhaps a lot of it from, for context to our listeners, I work in education, and so I interact with
Mhm.
a pretty wide slice of the at least the population of our state. Um, I think we might be getting there faster than you might think. I don't have the, unfortunately, I lack the statistics to um,
Right.
prove that. So I don't want to go out here asserting baseless claims. But the day-to-day interactions I have, both with my students and their families, gives me anxiety about the direction we're heading as a country on this particular issue. And I think it could turn genocidal and like deadly genocidal very quickly if we're not careful.
Right. Yeah. Like, this isn't a couple of fringe guys. It's almost like recruiting, I guess, in a lot of places. And, like, the really sinister part about these code words and insults, like adult baby and shit was one thrown, is that they sort of hide genuine malice. Not even hide genuine malice. They have genuine malice, but it's hidden behind words that are hard to penetrate and, like, form an in-group of, like, gender-critical people who may have never even met another trans person in their life, but still firmly believe this. And and this is dark, but also, I am a trans woman personally. The thing that's getting to me particularly about a lot of this stuff is that sometimes these code words make you look stupid, and that's sort of another takeaway I want from a lot of these groups is that you look silly. It doesn't mean they're not dangerous. It doesn't mean you're not like. It doesn't mean like what your kids might be listening to isn't bad. It's also just kind of dumb. Like you're calling just some random guy an adult baby and like a pedophile because he wears colorful clothing. It's like, I'm sorry, girl, but you have spiders in your brain. Your skull is a haven for arachnids. Your skull is a haven for arachnids.
I'm stealing that insult. That is excellent.
Yeah, I got it.
Using that the next time one of my parents says something stupid.
Right, because it's from the Grinch. Like, that's just like if you're calling people another slur I found, prunes, which is a portmanteau of gooning, which I don't have time, which TLDR's sexual, and trans people. Like, here's the thing: it's not a gender critical word, but the communities that do make those words flood into gender critical movements. If you're taking advice from the Troon guy, you're silly. You're a silly person. You're a silly person. Speaking of silly guys, I want to talk about our third group, and I swear I won't be as long-winded for this one. The rationalist community, which is definitely the least culty out of all of our groups, and probably the least dangerous. But, well, I'll explain. See, rationalist is not the only name for this community. There's also effective altruist, long-termist. Again, it's like the apes. They don't have a consistent word for themselves, so it's hard to figure out what they're doing. And this sort of started on a blog called Less Wrong, which founded by a guy named Eliezer Yudkowsky, who self-describes as like an AI expert and like an existential risk expert. And you think like, oh, that means he's like really studying with AIs and he's like been working in the field in a while. And he didn't graduate high school. He didn't graduate high school. Everything that he writes about in his blogs comes from like stuff from like Terminator and Star Wars. With the goal of like
or AI itself.
Or AI itself maybe at this point. Like
Can't rule that out.
You can't rule that out anymore. And again, there's another thing to watch out for. It can be hard to figure out which of these is AI and which of these is real. Less Wrong is real. Like, again, like a lot of these groups, they talk a lot, and they have in-groups technology such as Effective Death Spiral, AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, Crisis of Faith, which is
not...
Oh, sorry, you go.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say AGI. That is an established. So is rationalism, by the way. Some of these ones are interesting because these are real words with real definitions,
right, and
that are dangerously close, but slightly different than the way they're being used, I suspect.
Right, like when you think of artificial intelligence, especially nowadays, you think of like, like a machine that like, it can like generate a cruddy-looking image of like a Ghibli family or something. For the last like 10...
I still think of HAL 9000.
That too. That's what Yudkowsky's thinking, except it's real. Like,
That's disconcerting.
yeah, like there's a term for it on their jargon page because they have a jargon page, unfriendly AI, which is
Look, can I just say real quick,
of
credit
course
to them for putting a jargon page together for all of this.
right,
Like, not to give too much credit to the cult, but
but like
at least they understand that
yeah,
it's weird and that somebody might want to decipher this at some point.
right, and they do want to be understood, and like here's the thing, Yudkowsky isn't like leading it, like a lot of people are sort of neutral about him and may not even like him, but here's the thing. This is also a self-improvement blog slash comment section slash it's an amalgamation of things. So people are talking about how do we make ourselves more rational and even improve our bodies, so in order to like make the friendly AI that will, you know, create heaven on earth basically, which is a jump. So, like from the seeds of like
So it's so it's a so it's an offshoot of transhumanism then.
yes, transhumanism is big into this. I don't know a lot about transhumanism. I don't know if it's a cult, but this is one of the
Not
communities
as much
that's
as this.
yeah, not nearly as much as this. It is, and I forgot to mention the actual what the blog actually is. It is quote according to an article in The Reader, an online community for discussion of rationality, including decision theory, philosophy, self-improvement, cognitive science, psychology, artificial intelligence, game theory, metamathematics, logic, evolutionary psychology.
Wait,
I'll just end the quote there.
no, keep going. No, you keep going.
Evolutionary
What?
psychology, economics, and the far future. I will remind you, Yudkowsky did
Game
not.
theory?
Game theory is part of this. Game
What
theory.
is the, what does that have to do? What does that
I
have to do
don't.
with anything?
I.
Are we? Or I guess if you're talking about like
I
gambling on if the, like we're gonna play the prisoner's dilemma to see if we get the good AI or the bad AI.
I think honestly, it gets close because here's the thing. There's a thing called Newcomb's problem, which is kind of popular, where basically Omega, a hypothetical super intelligent being, like imagine it gives you like two boxes where one of the boxes contains $100, the other contains $1,000,000, and Omega knows has a good idea of which box he'll choose. So he like does his decision and then flies away, and now you're left with the boxes. What do you do?
Uh, he left.
Yeah, he. I guess he
I
just
accepted
leaves.
both boxes.
Uh, I don't know if that's a solution
Or does he
because
come back if? Or does he come back if I? Or does he come back if I open a box?
I don't think so. Because again, it's a thought experiment, but also I used to like the idea of like congratulations, Johnny Sonny Jim, you did the right thing, or sorry, Sonny Jim, you're in hell forever, which actually just brings me to another concept. Okay, so another concept that again mentioned in that same article is Rocco's basilisk, which is a concept that Yudkowsky doesn't like. Like, he banned discussion of it on his forums because you could do that back then. But it didn't go away in the community because Yudkowsky doesn't really have a lot of control, but he has some influence, but not a lot of control. And Rocco's Basilisk goes, quote, when, not if, a superintelligent computer divinity emerges from current and ongoing efforts to create what machine learning engineers call artificial general intelligence, the tech deity will, per its programming, want to do as much as possible to benefit humans, the Earth, and the long-term future. So far, so good, but here's the rub. The god does not yet exist, wants to exist, as soon as possible, so it can be more helpful. And so, to incentivize us all to make every effort to bring about said existence, it will arrange a kind of eternal Guantanamo Bay to forever torture anyone who fails to make such efforts to the maximum possible extent, even if all they did was hear the story and ignore it, as you absolutely should. So that's insane. So, so that's
Yeah,
like
I've read this.
Yeah,
I've heard of Rocco's Basilisk.
right.
It's a weird offshoot of the idea that's been explored in, I mean, even films as mainstream as Age of Ultron, where
Yeah,
if you create an intelligence with the goal of helping humanity, say you give it the goal of ending suffering. Well, the easiest way to end suffering is just to end humans.
right,
So
right.
bye.
Yeah, none of this is based off actual science. Well, some of it might be, but the primary motivator is like in movies like Age of Ultron and Terminator.
Yeah,
Like,
armchair philosophy based off of cinema.
right. Here's the problem, though. Yudkowsky has a foundation, like MIRI, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. You can give donations to MIRI, and I don't know, man. Like, and there's also CFAR,
Maybe don't.
the Center for Applied Rationality, which also accepts donations. You see the problem that's emerging here. So, uh,
We're not sponsored, by the way.
yeah, we're
We
not
should clarify that.
yeah, we're
I don't
not
know why I should
sponsored.
clarify that, but
Yeah, yeah, we're not sponsored by these
don't give
guys.
these people your money.
Don't give these people. Do not give anyone your money if their logic is if your fucking son starts making donations to oh fuck, I need to make a utilitarian ultimate decision whatever to spoil the conclusion of this whole thing. Get them off their phone. Get them off their phone. Get them off their phone. Because and here's the thing. All of these guys kind of talk about themselves and their role in the universe through utilitarian stuff, which brings us to the story of Maya Pasic, which is kind of a bummer. Kind of a bummer. Um, so,
All right, I'm ready. Hit
right,
me.
yeah. Maya Pasic was a young woman born in Poland, actually. So this is an international community who was commenting a lot on rationalism and effective altruist spheres. Again, this is all just sort of a circle. Um, and she blogged under the blog name Squirrel in Hell, but apparently there was this sort of line of depressive thought through her talking, and she seemed to be a very lonely person because apparently she was trying to build a communal group around the Canary Islands of rationalists, which happens. Stuff like this happens sometimes in these communities. They get a big house in the Bay Area or something, and they all live together and they all share their ideas. Um,
Right.
right. Another lonely person, and I have talked about this with you, but you may not remember because I ramble a lot. Ziz Lasoda was halfway across the world was also doing that, except on a boat. So
I
these two,
do know this story. I
yeah,
will allow you to tell it for the rhetorical
right.
device.
So these two meet in blog form. I don't actually know if they actually meet in person. They may never actually meet in person. So, they're
But they
these
know
two.
of each other.
Yeah, they know of each other and they talk a lot. And Pasek is talking about how she's kind of really sad and depressive a lot of the time. So Lasoda, to quote an article from S. Fist, says, quote, but Lasoda had been in significant contact with Pasek and had allegedly convinced her that her two brain hemispheres were split, one male and one female, and that her female half was suicidal due to her being trans. Pasek's a trans woman. So, that's not good for you. That's not really a good way to describe it. And what's worse is a method that Lasoda didn't create, but one of her friends did, called unihemispheric sleep, which I don't know if Pasek did this, but Lasoda did, where you sort of, you sort of try to make one half of your brain fall asleep while keeping the other half awake, and that can put you in a state where you can fix things about yourself, which is wrong. That's not how anything works. But
Yeah, I mean, there have been documented cases of splitting hemispheres.
Right.
I think there's a CGP Grey video about that,
Oh,
but it's ultimately just it's ultimately it's not like this. It's
right.
and certainly, I mean, I don't want. I mean, certainly, I've not read or seen anything credible about different halves being different genders.
Right. Like, I'm trans.
It's certainly.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
it's
go ahead.
possible, but, like, I'm trans, and, like, sometimes I get stuck in, like, holes of, like, discourse. Uh, I've never seen this theory. Like, this is a Lasoda original. This is a Ziz Lasoda original. Because, again, a lot of these guys think that they can,
Gotta
like,
love that.
yeah, you gotta love that. What you don't love is that, possibly related to her contact with this community, quoting again that article from SFist, Pasek took her own life in March 2018, jumping off a building in her native Krakow, about 2 months after coming out as transgender, and a year after traveling to the Bay Area to attend a rational conference put on by, as I mentioned before, the Center for Applied Rationality. And, like, I don't know if this is the fault of the community, but one of the last things Pasek wrote in this community was that suicide was the choice of, quote, bearers of selfish utility functions who expect negative utility. God, like, imagine being that person's parent, like, and they bring up an idea like that. Like, how do you stop that? Like, how do you.
I mean, again, speaking as someone who is relatively qualified,
Right?
that doesn't actually surprise me in the slightest.
Oh,
That kind of utility, that kind of language is not. Well, okay, that let me be clear. That kind of language is incredibly unique to the utilitarians and the whole
right.
this whole movement that we're discussing. But the
Right.
idea of essentially being a societal burden, which, if I understand, at least from my own understanding of philosophy, negative societal value, negative utilitarian value to society, whatever you're calling it,
Right.
it's just a more academic way, quote unquote academic way of saying that you're a burden. Now,
And that's
what I'm getting the sense here is that these ideas were fostered by this community, encouraged by this
right.
community.
And, like, this community has, like,
Um,
tried to distance itself from all this. Like, I've heard people say that, oh, these are just a random cult. This isn't our community. But I've also heard, like, people
yeah,
say,
I wonder why.
yeah, like, but also people have I've also heard, and it's just another comment talking about another clique called the Vassarites, which is like, I tried to Google this guy, Michael Vassar. I found a podcast where he was on, saw the word gender ideology, and then I closed the podcast, and then I closed the podcast.
Of course, they're all intertwined.
Yeah, like, again, Yudkowsky is not a far right or
Let's not
far left.
gloss.
Right, yeah. Yudkowsky is not
Let's
a
not
far
gloss
right.
over the whole story. No, go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, Yudkowsky is not a far right or far left guy. He's just kind of weird. But, like, again, Ziz did a lot of anarchist stuff, and Michael Vassar does that. And, like,
And let's not gloss over the fact that Pasek was told that effectively you're suicidal because you're trans.
right. And the weird thing is, Lasota was also a trans woman. So, and I think it's just because when you're in this community and talking about this stuff, you're applying massive concepts to yourself. So when you try to apply it individually, it makes no fucking sense. It makes no fucking. And it can only
Right.
be appreciated by guys who are also talking nonsense, like, say, Elise Yudkowsky, who, can I just quote one last thing that Natasha Tiku of the Washington Post said about him?
Please.
Yeah. Self-described decision theorist Elise, quote, self-described decision theorist Elise Yudkowsky, co-founder of the nonprofit Miri, went further. AI development needs to be shut down worldwide, he told in a Time magazine op-ed. This guy got an op-ed in Time. Calling for American airstrikes on foreign data centers if necessary. This
Yeah,
guy.
because
Cause,
that makes sense.
some of this guy's ideas have reached people like Elon Musk, by the way. Like Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Sam Bankman-Fried. He once got investment money from Peter Thiel, of all people. And Yudkowsky was recently brought to a party hosted by OpenAI. So,
Yeah. So this isn't pointless jabber on the internet.
right,
We've already discussed it taking a life, and that's bad enough.
right, and
But these are people intentionally inserting themselves from what you're saying into the highest echelons of society
right, and like,
for the sake of sharing these
yeah, and like,
toxic viewpoints.
whether or not like the Sam Altman or the Bankman-Frieds of the world actually care about this, like I think Bankman-Fried didn't actually care about this. He was just using it because people were talking about it. It's still bad. It's still bad. And
It's still bad and it has real harm.
right, and like you mentioned, like here's the thing about this is that there are some things that like some subcultures form cults, but despite the subculture not being culty, like stuff spins off from it. And I feel like a rationalist would try to say, this isn't we're not a cult. This is just a movement that spawned off from us. And like, so I say, Caleb, you watch CGP Cray, that YouTube guy I was talking about? Science guy does a lot of bad stuff.
Yes, I mentioned.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
know how many cultic subcultures that channel spawned?
Are we counting the hexagon thing?
No. Because the answer I put in my script, and
No,
I'm willing
because
to
that's kind of a meme.
meme. Here's the thing: none. CGP Cray has formed zero cults. I think it's fair to blame the rest of this community as like a cultic milieu, because like
Right.
CGP Craig can talk about like even life extension and like weird mass stuff, and doesn't create a cult that kills people. Like, like and
I
like
feel like that's against the whole point of that video, but you're right.
right. Uh, so
Because there's ethical ways to do that when you have a platform.
right, and here's the thing, and here's the thing that's frustrating. I think what really gets me is that I don't even know if Yudkowsky is like this or that thing, or if he's even done anything particularly wrong himself. But I don't feel like saying, hey, maybe we should airstrike bases if necessary. That doesn't seem very responsible to me. It doesn't seem very responsible to me. Mr. Yudkowsky, man whose hat. Viewers can look at this later, but he wears hats a lot, especially as he's gotten older and grown bald, which I'm not judging that. Like, it happens to all of us. Uh, but none of his hats fit him. Like, his head is slightly too large for every hat he wears. Slightly too large for every. It's actually kind of funny. Okay,
Yeah, that is quite silly.
right. Like, and again, a lot of these guys are silly. Like, they believe, like, we have groups that use in-group and out-group language to get people into a comforting community, like progressive language to hide sinister things. Groups using grandiose and borderline apocalyptic language to get people riled up to do insane things. Like, all of it is silly, and I think a big group that's like embodies that silliness is anti-natalism, because it kind of has a little bit of all of this, despite it being far less organized. Now, I don't think this is a cult purely. I think there are cultic milieus throughout it, but here's the thing. It's based off the premise that if you were born without your consent, that could mean that, like, there is something nasty and horrible about being born, period. And in fact, some people take it further with pro-mortalism, which is, like, maybe stopping people from being born is a good thing, actually?
So what you have there is just a death cult at that point,
I mean,
breaking down my knowledge of Greek roots.
yeah, kinda, yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about, essentially. We're talking about the anti-natalists, which is just saying that
Right.
what is the tied to the overpopulation thing with the whole just the
There are
unethical
ties to the
actions in a
climate.
world like this.
To quote an article from the Drift magazine by Gabby Del Val, to exist is to suffer. To bring another person into this world to suffer alongside you is an act of inexcusable cruelty. So says David Benatar, an anti-natalist philosopher who argues that procreation is inherently immoral. His fringe ideology, debated on digital fora and in graduate school classrooms, has yet to gain much real-world traction. And she doesn't like this guy. I think she goes against this guy's ideology, but again,
I mean, isn't that literally human nature, though? To
yeah,
want to, or beyond human nature, that's just nature.
right.
Nature is to want to further life.
Yeah, like being alive is, in my opinion, good. It just can be hard to notice that when like and the big breakout moment, which I'll get to very shortly. Again, this don't worry, this podcast does have an ending. Is that um, antinatalism? There was a study in Poland done. Uh, while the obvious group for this is like young men in their bedrooms, a lot of the participants in this study, like there was about 1,200 people, only 39% was classified as antinatalist, but a lot of women who like classify themselves in that area were, quote, regarding females, there were more factors observed that discouraged from having a child, such as fear of child's congenital diseases, pregnancy complications, dissatisfaction with medical services, and fear of exacerbation of maternal chronic diseases, end quote. Uh, So, and
Which
this
is
is
hard to argue against that,
right.
genuinely, in
Yeah,
this day and age.
it's hard to argue about that, and the study also mentioned environmental stuff, where as well as depression and anxiety, which uh, mental illness does not make you an
They have a point,
antinatalist,
right?
right? Like environmental change, it
No,
is happening. That's the kernel of truth: is that things will probably get worse for your kids before it gets better.
things are going to get bad. Not to mention the whole going through pregnancy thing in a country that seems to be so against the idea of women's healthcare is a
Right.
daunting task, and that's becoming more and more common around the world. I do see where this one
Yeah,
is
I think
getting
this.
its roots, but it does feel like, you know, it does feel like trying to use a sledgehammer to nail in a tiny nail, right?
Right, and that's
It's
and
you're
while
jumping several guns here.
right, and I don't. And here's the thing: is that especially amongst young men, uh, it's going to lead to some strange conclusions, including, and this one's a bit of a bummer, but it's also, and I don't mean to make light of it, kind of funny, because, and I think it's the most high profile thing of this entire movement, is where, as an article in Wired by Manisha Krishnan, where a person used their car to both explode and try to attack an IVF clinic in Palm Springs. Like, there's evidence he, on his website, because of course he had a website, like, was follower of antinatalism. I'm not going to name this guy or quote any of his words, because fuck him. Uh, I can censor that.
No,
Uh,
but you got a point. It's good practice. You don't want to give
right.
this guy a platform any more than he already has.
Right. But he mentioned in his live stream, which he was live streaming this. Like, and I assume he's live
And I
streaming to
assume
someone.
people, at least a few people, were watching. Yeah,
Yeah, there's got to be at least
someone
someone.
tuned into this.
Yeah, like, especially younger people who have the time and space, because this community does skew younger. Like, this community, because, again,
Which, again, given their core arguments, doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
right, yeah, and again, this article mentions nihilism a few times. This person says it's not quite nihilism. I'd argue it kind of goes even before that. This is not nihilism, period. Because,
Yeah, because nihilism is just abject neutrality on the concept of life, if I understand it correctly. It's saying that,
right,
there isn't a point to life, but not that life is abjectly evil to exist, at least not on the face of it.
right. That's not what this guy was. He was
Camus isn't out here saying that that it was cursing his parents for being born or whatever.
right, and most, not even a lot of pro-mortalists believe that this is the case. And someone in the article did say that the ISD analyst, quote, don't believe pro-mortalism has been a primary motivator of violence in previous cases it's been linked to, which is good. But this guy did mention how he wasn't brought into this world without his consent, which, again, there's that word again. It sounds almost feministy. Like, to go back to the GC guys, the gender critical guys, a lot of this uses very sophisticated sounding language to justify blowing yourself up in a car and only injuring 5 people and not actually damaging any of the embryos. Well,
that's and did anybody die other than the guy with the bomb?
Nope.
Because
so
I guess that's the silver lining to it. Is at least he was a bad suicide bomber.
Yeah, I love pro-mortalism. I love pro-mortalism. I'm going to prevent the action of life and kill self, which I mean,
which, hey, true to his word, he's the only person that consented to his death.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even factor that in because this community is hard to research because, again, this is the most high profile this community has gotten. It's just and it's subreddit ephilism, which is lifeism spelled backwards, basically, because of course they had a subreddit.
Isn't there literally just an antinatalist subreddit though?
There might be
called that, called antinatalism, or I've been on this Reddit. I've seen this before. I'm googling this.
This was sort of near the end of my project where I was kind of
there is literally r/antinatalism.
Well, what did this subreddit do to get banned? I actually don't know.
What do you think? There was a car bombing.
Fair enough. I mean, Reddit said it was, quote, removing any instances of the suspect's manifesto or recordings and hashing to prevent re-upload. Was this guy uploading his... Of course he had a manifesto.
And of course it was being uploaded to Reddit.
Of course. And this isn't a Reddit exclusive thing, but Reddit helps a lot. And again, a lot of people on Reddit skew younger. It's because they have time. And here's the thing is that a lot of these words and language can sound even profound, if a little weird, but I imagine these guys' main social circle this person's family may not have even known he was talking about this. Again, he live streamed a car bombing.
Yeah. That's pretty unhinged.
Yeah. So, to sort of get this to a conclusion, what can we do? What can you, the listener, do about this? It's notoriously hard to get people out of a spiral. And I'm admittedly going a bit off script, but this is still on.
No, go ahead.
But again, this is a bit of a bummer to end on, but you can't just focus on the goofy stuff, even though the goofy stuff is objectively funny. There's a reason that people in these communities become so convinced to do all these insane things. It's their community, their home turf, and trying to get out of that as a young or lonely person on the internet is impossible to do without taking a real toll on your mental health and ego. So, it's hard to, and it's honestly hard to try, but there are methods. I've seen 2 things, if I can find it in my notes. Why is Google Drive so hard to find? Right. A Psychology Today blog post isn't the best point, but Hyman says that definitely try to avoid an argument per se, but try to understand from, quote, from each of our perspectives, we see a coherent worldview and one that fits with our social groups, end quote. So, how do you deal with that? You have to deal with him like a rational actor. Uh, Another person named Mike Caulfield has a SIFT method, which is stop and slow down before following some new lead, investigate the source of information in order to check its reliability, find trusted sources to help you assess the information provided, and trace the origin of a new piece of information. That's like if you want to get like sort of
That's if
train,
you want to prevent yourself from getting sucked into
yeah,
one of these
or talk to
things
your kid about not getting into one of these holes.
and teach them that method. Exactly.
Right.
I actually might use that. I should run that as a program, unironically.
Nice.
But yeah, I think that's the hard part is if you have to go up to somebody who's screaming about the end times and say, "Yeah, you know what? You've got a good point.
But
Let's talk about it." And work through why they're crazy. And you'll see I do that a lot. I did it in this podcast. I kept playing devil's advocate for a lot of these people. I
right,
devil's advocated the car bombing people, which is not something I particularly want on my record,
right,
but
yeah.
to
You
let
don't
you know.
want like
Uh,
Caleb last name, car bomber, devil advocate. No, no, that's a joke.
no, but it's something you have to do in your day to day life because we're people. And if you fight them on it, if you call someone crazy, they're just going to think you're part of the other.
Right,
And you end up pushing them further into those echo chambers, further into those spaces where they're going to do things like tell people indirectly to kill themselves or participate in car bombings or
right.
destroy the stock market
To
for the
destroy the stock
lulz
market. So,
just for the sake of it. Yeah.
so, so, I guess it's just another tactic that Hyman suggested is like, and I'm struggling to find it. People must, quote, people must change their information environment. When someone changes the basic flow of information, their minds will follow. Remember when I said get them off their phone? Um, Honestly, it's sort of a personal recommendation. Maybe get them to like a woodworking class or, you know, or a D&D group.
Or maybe no.
Maybe no?
But play Pathfinder, it's better.
Play, pa-
Uh,
play, None of our audience knows what Pathfinder is. Most humans don't know what Pathfinder is.
I know. I had to.
Of course.
That's my cultic molo.
That,
Um,
yeah, uh,
Pathfinder showing. No,
Path,
but find some, figure out what is your child actually interested in. Connect them with that.
right,
Maybe they tell you they don't have interests. Yes, they do. They will, or maybe they just don't know it.
right.
We
Maybe,
were all moody, edgy teenagers at one point in our lives.
right, because,
Find a way to break them out of that shell.
yeah, and, and quote another article talking about a book by Sander van der Linden, a professor of social psychology at Cambridge. His book is called Foolproof. Uh, uh, Maybe like uh, show examples of like other people sort of breaking out of this sort of thinking, like quote borrow quotes or stories from former believers or those who have been under the control of a cult. But most importantly, and this is the fifth point he makes other points that we've already talked about. Uh, Let them know you care and watch for isolation. Like, even if you disagree with them, say that you care and keep them away from these, like, socially isolated blog things. Because, like, and this is just my experience, WordCast is a lot more fun than Reddit. Like, I use Reddit sometimes, but, like, that's not because I like using it. It's because I sometimes find interesting stuff in there, and it's good at hacking my brain. Like, no one. We're talking about kids specifically, but no one is immune to this. No one is.
Yeah, it's the this scope is just kids on the internet learning about diamond hands, but it could just as easily be for our audience, your parents,
Right.
you know, retweeting AI deepfakes of the president. Um,
Like,
left, right, and center, and saying, "Can you believe that Joe Biden did this, even though Joe Biden isn't the president?"
or
Or
alternatively,
even, "Can you believe Donald Trump did this?"
to
AI,
like,
Nala, it's AI.
right. And again, it is very easy to be tricked. No one is immune to this. Not your cousin Susan, not your kid Jonathan, and not you. That doesn't make us
Not highly educated people as well.
right.
People with PhDs can fall for this.
Yeah, like a lot of those rationalist guys, like again, we've already made our main point and we're kind of in the after show. A lot of those guys had PhDs and like big computer science degrees. Ziz Lasoda made a space weather analysis tool. Like, she wasn't a well, she isn't a dumb person. She's still alive. She's in prison now. She's in prison now. Which
For the murder, for the alleged, like, other people murder
no,
thing, or is
for
this
a
just
different
unrelated?
series of for a different series of murders. Uh,
Wait,
we,
what? This
we
person has a kill count? Okay,
I not
that's
directly.
a different story
That's
for
a
a different
different story.
podcast.
And another lesson, another tip: don't move to Southern California. Don't go to the Bay Area. Don't live there. Don't. A lot of cults can come out of Southern California. If your kid wants to move to the Bay Area, politely say maybe not, maybe not. The Bay Area prices are completely unaffordable.
And for any of our listeners in the Bay Area, yes, we are saying it's too late. You're already in a cultic Mileau and you need to get out. But don't worry, we care about you.
And that, my friends, is what you would call self-demonstration.